Alrighty. Hello. I'm a little bit behind. If anyone was like waiting on the 10 a.m., I had some technical difficulties, and then this whole topic in itself is going to be a kind of just depicting just the challenges that I've been in this week. So the title is we're going to be talking about fasting with intention. And a lot of this is due to I am doing one of my first, and I say one of because I have fasted in the past for different reasons, but this is my first spiritual fast. And so before I get started, let me turn off these notifications. Okay, so I wanted to talk about this today versus waiting until I was done with my fast, because the insights that I've already gained in the first 6 days, technically, this is day 7, have just been kind of astronomical. But then also I have this platform that is a professional platform where I see people hearing me, right? And because I am a healthcare professional and demonstrating and recommend, I wanted to talk about this first part of my fast and how it kind of translates into a recommendation for people, watching my journey, because I think that's really important given especially our state of mind right now. So let me just be clear before I dive into all the technicalities. I don't recommend fasting to just fast. That's why I put intention. Fasting with intention makes all the difference. And because I'm going to talk a little bit about my journey with fasting, not only this time, but then also in hindsight of times where I've used fasting as a method to seek weight loss, clarity, and then also talk about the impact that it has on our brains, our thought processes, cognitions, and how it can be the pros and the cons, right? It's not just detrimental. It's actually a great healthcare practice. But if you have a certain type of history, mental health diagnosis, I would like to just share my insights. So if you guys have noticed, this is one of the first times that I'm wearing my glasses, because one of the biggest things that really just off the bat is because this fast. So let me explain a little bit what my fast is like. So I am a part of a spiritual community called the Baha'i community. And every year we have a 19-day fast where from sunrise to sunset, we do not drink any water or eat any food. So to be clear, I am not fasting with no food for 19 days. I am eating and drinking a lot of my water and my nutrients before sunrise. And then I eat and try to hit my macros for the most part. I'll explain that in a moment, but in the evening after sundown. And this is really just for spiritual connection, alignment with a higher power, stuff like that. I'm not promoting anyone, a certain faith, but I do have a perspective on how religious fasting can also be complicated when we talk about mental health and neuroscience and addiction recovery, right? So one of the first things I realized is that a lot of people, even though I share a lot of my life, there are a lot of things that I do not share on social media, not because you guys aren't privileged to that, but because in real time, I'm living my life and I still want to figure out things that work for me with a little bit of privacy to it. And so let me just give you a brief synopsis. I actually did a video on my journey with the Baha'i faith probably 6 months ago-ish, and I can link it to this video because it's called Foundations in Faith and Recovery. Because a lot of my journey, I'll just kind of give a recap of that video, is I was baptized Catholic when I was younger. And after my father passed, I really got disconnected with the concept of a higher power. And so faith for me, I didn't have a whole lot of it throughout my formative years of understanding the world. And that, in my first video of that, I spoke generally on my story of how that impacted my career path, and then ultimately how it impacted my coping skills, my way of thinking, and ultimately my overall health, because I was a lot more science heavy. I pursued healthcare. I pursued understanding the brain, understanding this. And at some point, I don't know, I just had this feeling where I was like, you know what, let me slow down. A lot of my peers, we get like this process that keeps going and going and going. We get licensures, we get doctorates, we get all these things. And I was like, why doesn't it ever feel enough? And then I started just that one question kind of led me to start seeing things of like recognizing that my addictive pattern matched a lot with my clients. And I was like, but I'm not a drug addict. So it's like, what is this? And that's where I was really like kind of thrusted into this whole other side of addictions with process addictions. And I kind of dove in and I explored a lot more there academically. And I was like, oh, this is why I connect with addicts so much. This is why I find a lot of people taking energy from this. Is why I give so much. I had poor boundaries. I had a lot of belief systems that I had to kind of update and reform for myself. So who you see here today is a product of kind of going through over time. And it takes a lot of time to do that because, you know, I had to still work and pay my bills and, you know, do all this and live my life. I had to fine tune comb through a lot of my belief systems, a lot of my reactions to things, and live life with intention. So that's kind of my first thing is like, I'm not here to recommend anyone to do a fast. And honestly, if you are in a world of mental health, I would not recommend just jumping into a fast. But the first kind of revelation that I've had in this past week is I know I can't stop anybody from doing what they want to do. So I realized because my whole program is going through like the long-term sustainability of the internal work that I feel like is missing from a lot of diet culture, a lot of fitness, in like motivation, all that. I have this like the meaningful, thoughtful program. And then I realized I have some more work to do on my business, that I have to create a program to help people who are going to fast, who are going to do intermittent fasting. I'm not coming after intermittent fasting, but if you have a high-powered brain and you're not prepared for how to know your body sensations, how to know your body cues, how to be present with yourself and all of the thoughts and the beliefs and stuff that comes with that, then it's going to be a shit show. I'm just going to be honest with you. So fasting is a great thing, but I also realized I was like, you know what? My program is actually missing. Hey, good morning, Lori. It's missing a significant support system for the people who are honestly, I don't intend to stop anyone from trying to do it their way. But if I can help you kind of figure out a more balanced way to do this, I'm going to be adapting my program to help people going through that same model and then ultimately try to kind of get in where I fit in there. So that was kind of my first revelation. And a lot of it was like, oh, I have to kind of expand my programming a little bit to accommodate this. Now, I said something in that I really want to touch on is why fasting can be very difficult for someone who struggles with anxiety, who struggles with attention deficit disorder. It's actually part of the solution. Eventually, I encourage people to fast. But at first, when a person is so fast-paced in their thinking, and a lot of times they're actually fast-paced in their feeling, but the body can't accommodate that level of stress. That's self-perpetuated stress by just the way that we're kind of naturally designed. Part of recovery and trying to build a life that works with that type of brain has to come in you learning your body's sensations. And I do that through specifically the relationship with food, because you have to train the brain to slow down. And so when you take food out of the equation, you're almost bringing forth a pile of physical sensations that a lot of people are not equipped to interpret, and they're also not equipped to cope with. So for me, I actually, given that I have a lot of knowledge and I built my lifestyle to do these things, the third day? Yeah, so Saturday and Sunday were actually quite easy, but Sunday, I will say, because I don't really work on Sundays, it was difficult because I had all this time. So there's another sensation, like it's painful sometimes for us to have time where we're not, going out to Sunday brunch. And I filled my time, thankfully, mostly on Saturday with doing things, but I didn't have any water either. So I was like, I'm like hot. My body was reacting to having and wanting, it's calling for these things that I typically have, but I wasn't able to really fulfill that need. And so because I did a lot of the work before this, that was actually painful for me. So by the time I get to Monday, and part of the reason why you guys have to look at my ring light as a reflection in my glasses is because I realized just how much water was a buffer for my brain. And so Monday, when I came back to like work mode and I'm like, okay, I've got my admin meeting at 9. I already structure my time. Like, time management is imperative in mental health, but that's a topic for another time. But I had already had my process and my thinking. I was just like, ooh, we're going to go right to work. And I was humbled. I had one of the worst headaches I've had in years. I'm at the point where my body can cope. And then I also process pain pretty easily. I want to say easily. I still feel pain, don't get me wrong, but I also know how to manage it a lot with breath work and then my mentality to be able to withstand. I don't take a whole lot of anti-inflammatory ibuprofen medications. If I have a headache, that's my sign to take a small break versus just go to sleep. Like, I didn't do that. I took small breaks to try to see if it could come, like, kind of get back. And I couldn't. So I really was humbled here with, this is the other part that I think a lot of attention deficit disorder or anxiety disorder people struggle with, which is what happens when you don't meet your own expectations. Because I sure as hell was like, no, I'm going to respond to these emails. I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to be productive. And I didn't have my body's necessities to be able to meet my own expectation. And I even felt my brain was like, Sarah, you should be able to push through it. You should. And I was like, sir, ma'am, little committee in my head. We don't do that anymore. We don't just push past all of our limits just to meet an expectation that may or may not be realistic for that moment. And I've have to continuously practice that. And a lot of people, part of the people just stay busy all the time, and that's not actually helping your mental health. It's perpetuating dysregulation, and actually a lot of dysregulation in your body with hormone production is that people don't respect their own limits and then are surprised when other people don't respect them. I was one of those people, so I'm speaking about myself. If I'm speaking at you or to you, try not to feel too attacked, take a breath. It happens to all of us, is that when you don't respect your own limits, people don't respect yours. And so if we're sitting here feeling lonely and we want people to see us, but we don't respect our own limit of silence and not asking for, hey, I'm going through something, can I talk about it? People are not going to know to actually attend to us in our social, in our any type of relationship, right? So that's just one manifestation of that. But from like just an individual interpersonal standpoint, us having limits is extremely important to have healthy relationships, not only with ourselves, with our emotions and our thoughts, and in turn our behaviors for long-term outcomes and success and growing businesses and all that. We don't have a whole lot of that. Our culture, a lot of what we're exposed by is you go all in. That's how we're literally built. It's not a bad thing, but why people struggle with burnout is because the application, like I'll speak for therapists, and I'm not speaking for all therapists, but I'm speaking for myself, is did we learn about boundaries in school? I don't really remember that much. I learned about them when I started getting into private practice. That's 5 years into my career where I started learning about boundaries and understanding that they're internal. They have nothing to do with anyone else. And that was where I knew it, but then I had to apply it. So that was part of that, when I was first starting my transformation, that I was still learning that. And that actually has kind of played out over maybe the last 5 years. I forgot to close my door. Every time I leave my door open to get fresh air, I swear every fire truck comes by, every lawnmower goes by, and I'm just like, seriously, y'all? Can't I just have my moment? Anyways, point being, so when I was doing that and I had to actually get the information out of here and knowing something and putting it into experiential application, that's where I see a lot of helpers, healers, where they struggle is because the accountability is not there. Self-accountability is really freaking hard. So you guys see me in the gym and it's like, oh yeah, she got this discipline. I learned all this shit from trial and error. I forced myself to do it the hard way because I knew for myself, I had to break bad habits. I had to break thought patterns that, oh, I need a trainer. I don't need a trainer. I wanted a trainer because I needed the accountability. But me taking the path of like, okay, I'm going to try to, the accountability is going to go on my schedule, or I'm going to be intentional about my time, because that's what I was preaching to, you know, a recovering addict who was dealing with boredom. And, you know, they wake up and they don't have they have a lot of time, but they may not have quite an established business or something that keeps them busier. And boredom is a huge trigger for a lot of people. It's where we start to just seek things out that are mindless because they give us some hit of dopamine, the doom scrolling, all that. But it's a balance. I have completely overbooked myself before, and then I realized like, oh, that's causing me more stress. Let me not do that, right? So that kind of bringing that back around to like has to do with fasting. When you have more time, I've had more time. I have recorded a couple more TikToks that I took a break from TikTok just because the whole ban and everything. And I was like, but I stopped using that space as a space of self-expression. That came back a little bit more because I'm not eating. Or I played with my cat Maisie, because in my mind, one of the emotional triggers that I hold and expectations I hold myself to is I don't play with her enough because I'm standing here working all day, right? So fasting will bring you so much more time, but if you do not have the structure, as well as if you cannot sit with your own silence here because you're one of those people that keeps yourself busy all the time just to not hear the internal noise, that right there, I wouldn't say it's not automatically going to cause you to, you know, be suicidal or anything like that. It's going to increase stress. And if you are not prepared to consider what you're going to do, then it can be more detrimental than it can be helpful. So that was kind of like one of my first, like, wow, got it. I'm doing this spiritual fast really for me to explore my spirituality more, because this is like so it's technically year 3 of Baha'i for me, but I only declared last March, and declaring meaning that I inserted my name in the pot ultimately of being part of the community, studying every Wednesday night. Like, you know, I post a lot on social media, but to explain what I'm doing is just, it's too much. I don't believe social media, we have way too much insight about each other, honestly. But if I'm going to share something, it's not because I didn't want y'all to know. It's just like, if I take a picture of my study book, you'd be like, what the hell is this? Like, what's going on? Every Wednesday I go study, and I have dinner with my spiritual family, and we study the text and the history of the faith, and which intersects with other faiths, which is why Baha'i is so similar to Ramadan. Another reason did not back out of the fast this year was, so a couple months ago, I was losing motivation in the gym. To y'all, probably didn't seem like anything, but for me, I was like, yo, I'm tired. I didn't want to get up in the morning. And I started speaking to people at the gym, and this is at your local Planet Fitness, where a lot of people say there's no community. It really just depends on whether you create the community or not. But I started, this one guy, I noticed him ever since the year I've been going to this gym. We're there at the same time. So then I started, doing the fist bump a couple months ago. And lo and behold, he was losing motivation too. And he's a retired bodybuilder. So I was like, hell, he can teach me something. So he is actually Muslim. So when he said he was fasting on this same time period, I was like, okay, I can't make any excuses. I have to try this, because I was scared at first. This fasting philosophy, if you guys have heard, it kind of goes against everything that I have built from a subject matter expert, from a mental health and addiction recovery standpoint. It doesn't contradict it, but it's just not what I primarily recommend. So I was like, okay, this actually has to be something I do for me to empathize more with my clients, for me to understand how to help people where they're at. Because that's the other thing I do in individual sessions is I gotta get in where I fit in. I get 1 hour to learn a person, to figure out what they're going through, and try to give them something that they can do that will reduce harm little by little. So this is a new level challenge for me. I'm essentially just gathering data, my own data, but then also observing what's going on for me physically, but then also how it impacts my clients. I had to be very mindful of my energy and telling my clients, like, look, I needed some grace because I might be a little bit testy. But then also what I also realized here, so this kind of goes back with a sensation. So not only pain was a big issue, time, but respecting your limits of dealing with other people's energy. So this is two parts to it. One was the hardest part the first day of the fast, first and second day, and maybe even the day before the fast started, was dealing with people's perceptions of me fasting and their discomfort with it. And I was very susceptible to that because most people were anticipating me to be in pain because, and I want to say it's all projection because not everything is just projection, but it was their perception of what fasting is projected onto me and being, oh, are you going to be okay? And a lot of it was misinterpretation of what I was saying. They missed that I was actually eating before sunrise and I was eating. Whereas when you say fasting for 19 days, people think you're just not eating. And I was like, no. Like, don't do that. You need fuel. Your brain needs water. It literally is all mush up here. So if it is not hydrated and lubricated, it's not going to work very well. It's not going to be efficient, right? And it also needs certain micronutrients and all that. So if you're not prepared, like this is really about preparation. If you're not prepared to know how many macronutrients that you typically need to work at a level of intellect, because for me, I do a lot of analyzation all day. I sit on a screen all day. So I am definitely more brain power than I am in terms of like a physical labor job. But I also am still in the gym, so there is physical labor, right? But you have to be prepared to know the nutritional aspect of what you're doing if you're going to continue to function, really. And that's not even just for functioning to produce work. It's really to just feel like yourself in some regard, which kind of the point of fasting is to not feel like yourself. So it really depends. So respecting limits. I was going to say in the sensation of, dealing with other people's perception. Then there's this is one that I just dealt with more today, is respecting your own, which I actually kind of talked about already, respecting your own limits and knowing that your internal, like your expectations are sometimes conditioned just by what you did yesterday. It wouldn't even have to be intentional. If you expect if you have unrealistic expectations of yourself for productivity, it's just not going to, I don't believe fasting is going to be what it needs to be for a spiritual reason. Here's the other part of intention and respecting your limits, because this had me thinking about my past experiences with the intention for fasting to lose weight. There was a time in this journey where I realized that food wasn't just my only process. It was in my relationships. It was everywhere. So one of my goals when I had one number goal this whole time just to see, because I was always told 185 BMI, all this, like right? So my lowest weight I ever got to was 207. And, but that goal that I was going for was to be able to skydive. So the last time that I ever did anything fasting related was when the opportunity came where I could see the end of the tunnel where I was like, oh, I could skydive. I'm 240, right? Because I think the limit is 250 in America. A couple years ago, I went on a trip to Egypt in the Middle East. And I was like, yo, I want to skydive in Dubai. Well, come to find out, their height and weight requirements are not the same as in America. For women, I believe the weight requirement was 190, and for men, it was 200. Now, I am the size of an average male stature. I don't care what country you're from and what requirements outline it. In America, I'm taller than the average male, and weight-wise, I'm just not gonna. That's why these structures need to be reformed. You guys, we're all conditioned to think BMI, healthy, unhealthy. It's very black and white. This is why I'm trying to bust this open, right? So when I was motivated by this number, because I was like, I wasn't at 207 yet, I was about 240-ish, I believe. I was like, bet. My brain saw that challenge. I was like, all in. Hindsight, there's your addictive trigger right there. I went to an extreme measure and I was fasting, but it wasn't like intermittent fasting. I stayed pretty consistent with eating throughout the day because I already had figured out, oh, my brain needs a certain type of nourishment to stay focused, to be productive. But I went to like, I want to say primarily liquid diet, but I did more protein shakes and then a lot of greens, whole foods. But I wasn't hitting my protein goals. I wasn't even considering the amount of preparation and the hydration I needed to actually release weight. So by the time the trip even came around and Dubai wasn't budging, they weren't letting me skydive in the 200 category. I think it motivated me, but I only dropped about 15 pounds. So I got down to 225-ish. So for America, I made the weight limit, but it left me feeling like I wasn't good enough. I didn't meet it, didn't meet the expectation. That's the kind of stuff that I talk about when we respect our limits. I disrespected my whole philosophy because there's a whole other side of the story that is a little bit more complicated, but I'll just say this, that I was exposed to something that was not meant for me. I was exposed to another culture's values on how they view body types and I'm not going to say worth because I don't know enough and I'm not coming for any type of culture. I just was the number of something I wanted to do, but it had nothing to do with who I was and what I had built for myself and what I respect from a science standpoint, as well as a self-respect standpoint. I don't fit the mold. And I believe that's part of my purpose and perspective is that we have to make new molds as our society and our humanity evolves. And so this fast is absolutely teaching me a lot more of that because I do think my body needed it. The last 2 years I've been open about this being a grieving period, having lost my cat who kind of like raised me, and also going through a lot of business transitions and rebranding and recreating. And I realized I was like, some of my foundational fundamental principles of what I do professionally stuck, but I had to kind of tweak them a little bit. And that was also stressful because I put myself more in a cerebral state of like produce, create, do business than I actually was respecting my own limits. So that showed up in, I want to say weight gain, but I was also building muscle. I was eating more because some of it was emotional, but a lot of it was stress related. What you guys don't see a lot of times behind the scenes is scrolling more at night, staying up past the time that I know that makes my body and my brain feel good the next day. And so these are all habits and routines that when you're fasting, initially can help you become more prepared, become more aware, but they can also long-term do a little bit more damage if you're not prepared to deal with the emotional inflammation of said fast. Okay, so that was pretty much, wasn't that all I wanted to talk about? I think that's about it. Because today, I don't want to keep giving so many examples, but like if you're watching my stories, leg day is my favorite day. Legs have always been the strongest part of my body. They've carried me around and a lot of me around. And it was a light day, leg day, and I was humbled. I didn't change anything. I still drank my water. I still drank my electrolytes. I was prepared every other day. But today, what humbled me was my mindset of like, get in there, get out. And my breath work failed. I won't say I almost passed out, but I did get a little nauseous. And then I also this is what I do is already TMI for a lot of people, the depth of how I talk and converse with people to help heal. But I'm going to say it anyway. As a woman, I still have natural cycles that I have to be considerate of. And for women's mental health specifically, this is something that I have to integrate into the program that I run to help people understand how to respect your own limits when a cycle that you can't control, that makes you who you are, is actually going to impact. So today I realized part of the reason I was so weak was because my cycle was starting. And I was like, oof, I have some reevaluation to do. The workout's done, but for tomorrow, I was already going to take a rest day, but my fasting handbook in Baha'i suggests for women to not fast during their cycle. And so when I get off of here, I have to kind of consider and go back and consult, I don't really say it's scripture, text. I have to go back and consult the text about what's going to work for me. Because this does, even when I'm not fasting, my cycle is actually a little bit of a different routine, not for the gym. The gym actually stays during my cycle because that is helpful for pain management. It's actually helpful for energy, since a lot of women do lose, we're losing nutrients as we shed a lining. We as women need to have movement during our cycles, but because I'm not eating, I need to go back and consult. So this is really about respecting your limits. And recovery is that. It's about respecting the limit of just the moment sometimes, and being able to slow down, get your breath in. That was another thing this week working with clients. I was like, oh, I don't have water to just kind of sip and like get back, so my throat would start kind of getting more raspy, and maybe it is even raspy now, but this fast is only 7 days in. There's a lot that is challenging me to really think about, okay, how do I feel physically? How do I feel emotionally? What is coming up in my thought processes? And how do I stay as regulated as possible? Because I need that consistency. The only reason I am this consistent is because I've had to train my brain to slow down and take it step by step. And that's where I trust you. Life goes very fast. It goes very fast. And then people get to that point and they're like, I wish it didn't go by that fast. You do control that. You have some control over how fast your life goes. Now, your kids grow up fast. I totally get that. But you still do have control over how fast your life goes and how fast you witness your kids growing up. And that has everything to do with the mindfulness and learning how to balance fast and slow. So my throat's telling me, it's like, yep, you're at your limit. So I am going to probably leave it there because I still potentially have a whole other week of insight to share with y'all. And then ultimately, like I said, it hasn't really, it's if anything, it solidified my recommendation for people to not just jump right into intermittent fasting when you're trying to restore health, unless you are prepared to deal with the internal stuff that you go on. If you do need any help with that, I do have my program that is self-guided. It's work at your own pace that helps kind of stagger some of that that mindfulness building and that brain training back into your lifestyle. So then that way your brain every day is not going to be perfect, but it's going to regulate back again and help you deal with stress a lot better in your life. So just take that into consideration. And that's pretty much all my brain's allowing me to do today, because the whole thing has been respecting your limits. And I'm going to be doing that today because I do work tomorrow. I see clients tomorrow. So I've never seen clients on Fridays, and it's been a faith practice in itself to make sure I have an admin day, because when you see clients perpetually, it's disrespectful to your limits. And yeah, I could technically make more money by seeing clients now, but it would also cause more stress where I'd spend the money. So I am going to do my admin stuff, and I might just really have to sit down and not be at my desk for the rest of the day. So that's where I will leave it. I gave you guys some considerations that if you are going and considering a fast for even spiritual reasons, let alone or losing weight, please try to incorporate some preparation and consideration to what goes on inside you, and not just a matter of like trying to get smaller, because I promise you it's actually not going to help you in the long run. So enjoy your Fridays. I will see you guys next week, maybe with another recap, but we'll see how it goes. So have a good weekend.